right, Father Holub, are we ready to get into the next topic?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, dear friends at Collegium Wojtylianum. Today, we're returning to our discussion on Karol Wojtyła and his philosophy. And I thought a really nice way to get our channel going is with the discussion of personalism. This is how very often we talk about Wojtyła's philosophy, just kind of a short, slang-sounding personalism. But Father Holub, today I want to talk about what personalism is, and specifically what it was for Wojtyła. So what better way to get going than by just asking, was Wojtyła interested in the person?
Yes, definitely. He was very much interested in the mystery and complexity of the human being, and that's why he spent so much time and energy to analyze human personhood. I think that the more mature he was as an intellectual, the more time and energy he gave to this problem, to solving this problem, to shedding some light on this important problem.
And actually, you said an interesting word, mature. He matured obviously as a person, he matured as a philosopher, but how can we say that his interest in the person matured also as he went along in his studies and in his writings?
As a young student of gymnasium, a secondary school, he was very much fascinated with literature, with poetry. Later, he got some interest in spiritual theology, in theater, but finally, we can see that he moves very decisively to the field of philosophy, and at this field, the central role is played by the problem of personhood. Behind that, of course, as we mentioned, is the mystery and complexity of the human person, and that need to, even the drive to understand more who the human person is. So I would say that Wojtyła's interest in the human person matured gradually. So finally, when he was a mature scholar, intellectual, being at the same time a cardinal, later pope, he worked out a number of interesting projects, ideas and projects associated with the human person, and that's worth pondering.
So I want to ponder a little bit more, and I want to think about, we have Wojtyła, and we have the issue of the human person, but within this issue, we have the idea of the act. Could you tell me a little bit more about the act of the person as the starting point for Wojtyła's philosophy?
Yeah. What's interesting about his philosophy of the human person is that he didn't want to prove that the human being is a person. He assumed that at the starting point, but he wanted to show in a novel way how to investigate the human person. And actually, the human act, is this starting point. Observing the human act, analyzing the human act, properly understanding the human act, and finally looking for adequate reasons for this act, we can get into the interiority of the person, to at least partly contemplate what's going on in the human person, in his spiritual and intellectual life.
And from Wojtyła's contemplation and from his analysis of the human person, then through the act, how could you characterize his perspective of the person? What do you think we could summarize this as being?
Yeah, definitely he was a phenomenologist, but also he was very familiar with the classical Thomistic philosophy. He appreciated many contemporary schools of philosophy, like the philosophy of dialogue, which is striking, especially in his late works on the human person. In a sense, he was looking for various philosophical tools enabling him to shed more light on the person, to get more closely to the mystery of the human person. So basically, he was driven by the experience of the human person, by a kind of charm, appreciation of who the human person is. And Only later he was looking for adequate tools, philosophical tools, of course, helping him, to understand what he had experienced.
And what do you think those human interactions, these ideas, and those tools, where do you think that brought him? How could we summarize the experience that he learned from, the understanding that he gained? If you could just explain it like in short, what would you say about this final product he ended up with?
It's good noticing one more thing, namely that his philosophy of the human person was developed in a quite specific context. It was the context of the communist regime in Poland, more broadly in the Eastern Europe. And this philosophy, in a sense, was a kind of response he gave, to that attempt by Marxist philosophers and also communists to subject the person to the society, to make it a kind of secondary reality. So Wojtyła, in a sense, expressed his protest against that, showing that uniqueness, unrepeatability, dignity of the person must be very clearly distinguished and cannot be treated as byproducts or secondary products of a society. So in this sense, he revitalized, I would say, a long European tradition, philosophical tradition, but also Christian tradition, showing the priority of the person in all social dealings. So I would say that his intellectual project was at the same time a social project and a civilization project. So definitely it can be read in many ways.
Maybe we could say almost his philosophy was like an answer to the philosophy, the predominant philosophy of his time. And this gets me thinking, because the philosophy of the time was teaching about the idea of the person being a cog in the wheel, just a part of the mechanism of society. And that was in the 20th century reality of Poland. But what do you think that Wojtyła's philosophy holds for us now in 21st century Poland, 21st century Europe, the 21st century world?
That's a very good question, because what we witness today is a kind of demise of all person-related projects. Even some attempts are promoted to show that the human person does not exist or is unimportant. I think that Wojtyła's project, Wojtyła's proposal proved that actually there is the opposite. The person must be in the center of attention, in the center of society, and his identity is not decided on the level of his, her gender, sex, or social status, but is decided on a very metaphysical level into which the personal dignity is permanently inscribed. And this should be our starting point whenever we talk about the human being today and his problems. So in a sense, he keeps our attention at this classical project of the person, which of course was later developed by personalist movement. But I think that this project can teach us a lot and help us enormously when we deal with some contemporary problems. For example, when we deal with the environment, when we deal with this tendency to just define the human person through various genders, or through social status, belonging to this or that nation. I would say, well, these factors have secondary character. First, we should look at who the person is in its foundation.
Father Howell, thank you so much. This is a fantastic point for us to stop the video at this point. I'm going to ask all of you guys out there who are following us to please make sure that you subscribe, check back to see what happens in the future, and follow us for more Wojtyła content, because this discussion on personalism is the first level, and there's a lot more to come as we go to understand the thought of the idea of Karol Wojtyła, the man, the philosopher, and the Pope.